So you said that you guys want to be the Google of JavaScript packages, and I find that to be a very interesting statement that I want to unpack. Because like right now, it used to be that there was just NPM. You had one place to search, but things like JSR have come up where it's a completely separate registry. They do very different things than what NPM is doing. Do you guys plan to like kind of have your own public registry that is like melding all of these and making it into one cohesive experience?
Yeah, so phase one of this has been introducing the client, which essentially um, interacts with NPM and any other NPM compatible package registry. Phase two was introducing VSR, which we think is sort of unlocks the ability to self-host and gives you some freedom to distribute packages yourself. Again, aimed at a couple different use cases. We heard time and time again from folks who were either selling their own software or had, private packages that, and teams that they just can't imagine paying, the $30,000, $40,000 enterprise licenses and getting a fraction of the real APIs or tooling to support just private software hosting. So that was sort of phase two. Phase three is to introduce an interface between those public registries, essentially indexing NPM fully resolving, essentially doing a spider's walk of the fancy graph for you. And JSR is on there as well. So the opportunity there would be to point to us as an upstream for either your VSR registry itself, or directly with your client point at our registry in the future. I do not think we'll probably introduce our own publishing destination from the get-go, but it would be on our radar to eventually have you be able to publish into our registry as well. I think the opportunity here is to not disrupt the current ecosystem's way of distributing. If folks continue to publish to NPM, that's totally fine. I think there's a lot of benefits to using us to consume from that ecosystem. If you ever are wondering where the VLT acronym comes from, it's actually virtualized logical trees. So the whole idea is that we're actually trying to virtualize and push upstream the resolution, which has so often, been this redundant compute that we all do on our systems and our CI so often, and sort of wasting many cycles resolving the same dependency graphs. And if we push that upstream and allow a service to do that for us, we can get a lot of benefits. Is that the answer to the Google indexing? It's a very broad, what does Google of packages look like? I think for the JS ecosystem specifically, it's let's know what we're about to install and not have it be a surprise for you.
I think just like the graph, the dependency graph, being able to like bring that front and center and get enriched information about it. I do think that this vision of just like, you know what, there's a lot of package registers out there, but like, here's where you go to find it. Because that becomes like pretty big, right? That's like a challenge in the space now is like now more than ever before, I have so many places I have to go to look for something. It's like looking at NPM, and one interesting challenge that I'm really curious how y'all deal with is all the spam that like NPM gets hit with these days, which is, I have a lot of sympathy for the team having to deal with that. Like T like packages or whatever or problem. But anyway, it's like between, actually searching on NPM and finding results, or like going to JSR or just searching GitHub, it's like, that's a real challenge, sometimes to find like, where are the high quality packages? Actually, how can I find it from all the noise? So just an integrated search product where you can install from one place, it would be super valuable,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of missing, like I said, 1,000 paper cut features that I think that we can execute on. The real problem I think NPM had was we stuck too long to the, PQM scores that were created by NPS, I think, nps.io, we forked their indexing and their quality metrics back in the day, and NPM didn't move off of that until I think just about a week ago. They finally switched to just allow you to sort by downloads. And I think really, if you're talking about trying to address even spam in registries, or finding high quality indicators for good quality or high quality packages, and during that discovery phase, I think you need more than even downloads. You need a rich set of metadata associated with those packages. And so the opportunity here is to partner with folks that are also doing this work. I've referenced it already a couple times already, but Socket.dev, I think, have been doing an amazing job at doing package analysis, whereas a lot of other security companies have focused on the CVE ecosystem, which can be hit or miss in terms of the quality. Actually doing stat code analysis, and sometimes I think they're even potentially doing active or runtime analysis to actually discover key insights about the quality of a package and potential malware that might be in there. I think that's way more useful than alerts or advisories post installation, obviously.
Before we move on to the future facing questions, I want to ask you a little more about hosting paid packages. So it's another thing called out on the homepage, but that seems really interesting to me, where you might be this like Google in this first stop before I find packages. If I could also find packages to pay for, that would be really interesting. So is that something you guys are working towards also?
Yeah. So when I got to NPM, there was a bit of a firefighter moment. It was going through a transitionary period. I think it was 2019. So I was hired about a year before we were eventually acquired. And one of the key things that folks were talking about at the time was both spam in their terminal, and we could quickly address that. But at the time, actually for us, was running his funding prompts and ads in your install output. If you remember that. And that got a lot of noise in the ecosystem at the time. And one of the first things that we shipped in the CLI was the funding feature. The idea that you could, essentially codify some metadata about where to find, sponsorship or funding opportunities for the packages that you're consuming. And GitHub did this as well, and introduced something similar around the same time with sponsorships, and actually activated a mechanism to do Stripe sort of donations and monetization that way. But donations are not at all a mechanism for sustainability. And I've seen this play out many times. Marketing budgets get slashed the minute times get tough, and there goes the donations, and the developers no longer can sustain sort of the open source model. And so many people came to us and said, hey, like, I would love to license, I have a separate license for this software. How can I restrict it? And so we've actually got 2 customers right now with 2 different use cases, sort of the private packages, and another one that is essentially a SaaS company itself that sells their software and is hosting packages using essentially VSR. And they have roughly 5,000 customers themselves. So yeah, the future for that definitely looks like, we could help developers essentially get paid for or license their packages. But what is more interesting to me is actually finding a way to operationalize open source in a new way that creates new value, because all of open source's value is essentially squeezed. There's no more money or value to sort of get from it, unless you're trying to retrain models that have already read all of our code and trained up on them and sell that back to us the second or third time. But I think there is an opportunity for runtime, a new runtime or compute offering, essentially, that operationalize packages essentially as a service. And there's a whole category of packages in the ecosystem that lend themselves really well to this. You can imagine like Moment.js being used as like an API, consuming that and essentially paying us for the compute, offloads a couple things. It flattens your dependency stack, and then this service essentially would rev share the money back to the ecosystem. So all of the dependencies in that stack, in that execution, would essentially get money. So in terms of getting developers paid, the long road for us will be this sort of fourth or fifth phase of the platform to ensure that the ecosystem actually becomes sustainable long term. And there's benefits on both sides in the way that I see, us going forward with that product. Is the benefit for the consumer is a flattened dependency stack, less DevOps, and they also get to contribute, into the ecosystem. And the open source ecosystem gets to benefit from rev sharing, that product from that product. So creating new value and then, encouraging folks to love or adopt or tell their, teams to get us into their, CI pipelines, by essentially paying back, writing the check that you're not getting from GitHub today, writing that check for you as a author or maintainer of a dependency, deeply nested potentially in the transitive dependency stack. So while there's opportunities to do what you're saying in terms of a marketplace play, I think the long-term sort of sustainability is where I think we're going to invest time, probably towards the end of this year.